All of merit to the foundation of the music, to all the godfathers who set
it. Musically speaking, good afternoon, coming to you live from the National Arena. This is Expo 23, and the Bridge 99 is there. Wow, what a show we have today for you. And we're talking about documenting our heritage. It's a very important part of national development. And today we have some people who have in their own way been involved in the documentation of our national heritage. So, online we have entrepreneur, banker, attorney, author, and so much more. Talking about my good friend Wayne Chen. He's here. He's obviously well placed to talk about documenting our heritage. Of course, we have Professor of Culture, Gender, and Society, a woman who is pretty well known for commentaries on Jamaican music and Jamaican culture, talking about Professor Donna Hope. And also online is serial entrepreneur. He invested everything. You know, he invests in music, he invests in concerts, he invests in hardware and lumber, and he invests in restaurants, and he invests in museums, and he's into everything. Talking about Joe Bogdanovich. These people have, in their own way, as I said, made their contribution to the heritage of Jamaica in terms of its documentation, in terms of its recording. And so we'll be having that conversation this afternoon with these people, and we'll be hearing what are their views, and you'll be hearing mine too. So it's going to be quite a show today from the National Arena. Now, Wayne.
Yes, my friend.
My friend, author of, or co-author of Reggae Roots with Kevin O'Brien Chang. Can you tell me, Wayne, if you believe that we have a deficiency in terms of the documentation of our heritage?
We have, Jamaica's not just a deficiency, we have a huge deficiency. When you think of the number of books that are published in this country on an annual basis, you have that on the one hand. And when you think of how much reading that we do as a country, you see that there's a huge gap between countries of a similar size. You have a country like Iceland, which has maybe an eighth of Jamaica's population, that publishes hundreds and hundreds of new books per year, hundreds and hundreds of scholarly articles, hundreds and hundreds of articles for popular consumption. And yet still, I would posit that their contribution to global culture is a fraction of Jamaica's. The challenge we have had as a society is that we have been an oral society. And even though we have made a significant contribution to the world of music, and I want to stop and give a shout out to our friend, Barrington Levy, who I just heard a little snippet of as in the opening, who turns 59 today, and I give a shout out to him as a friend from up in the hills of Clarendon. And I use him as a jumping off point. I don't think Jamaicans in general understand the significance of Barrington Levy. We love Barrington, we know he's one of the most unique voices the country has ever produced. Rolling Stone magazine, when they recognized, or they tried to recognize, the 200 greatest singers of the modern era, have Barrington on the list as one of 5 Jamaicans. Tootsie Bert, Barrington, Toots also a Clarendon man, Luciano, who is from down in Davidton, in my neck of the woods in Manchester, and of course Bob Marley, and Dennis Brown, they're ranked as #1. We know them as good singers in Jamaica, but we don't posit them, we don't contextualize them in terms of their significance. I first saw Barrington Levy sing when he was a young teenager, maybe 14 or 15 years old. And in those days, he was singing on a sound system, on sound systems. He had a unique voice. He was a prodigy. And he was recorded. I mean, in the late 70s, I remember Studio One. He did some Studio One recordings. Notably, he did recordings with other studios. Murderer is one of the greatest songs ever to come out of Jamaica. I constantly reassess it. But there are others. I mean, James Samuels, when he directed, the Black American director who directed The Hard They Fall, reimagined what a movie soundtrack ought to sound like, inspired by Barrington Levy. And he remixed Here I Come as the opening sequence into a Western featuring prominent African-American characters, reclaiming the Western, reclaiming movie music, and in a way, it bringing together a lot of cross-cultural references, because Jamaican music was inspired by spaghetti Western music, Ennio Morricone and others, which was all made up. It's all made up, but putting us back into where we ought to in the canon, into the whole global context of culture. It's all happening, but how many Jamaicans are really aware of it? Because we're just not writing about it, we're not recording it, we're not positioning it, and we're leaving it to others to do it. Just using Barrington Levy this morning as a jumping off.
Leaving it for others to tell our story. Ian Randall once told me that he thought that the reason for the deficiency in terms of our literary culture was that we were people who would sing our songs, and I think you have alluded to that in terms of saying we're an oral culture and not necessarily a culture that subscribes to literature in a big way. But that in itself, as you have pointed out, it means that even stories, I mean, because you have people like Barrington Levy who tell stories, but Barrington Levy's story needs to be told. And there's so many other stories that need to be told. Joe is involved with the telling of Copeland Forbes's story, which Copeland is now here with us live at the arena, and that is very important. But that is one of so many other stories that we need to be telling. And there is a culture, I mean, you said there's an absence of reading and so on, but we have to find a way of telling these stories on film, on video. Of course, you have to put on some writing first, as Lenny Little White always reminded me. If you don't have a situation where you have good script writers, then you're at sea. So some writing has to be done. Professor Donna Hope, you want to take up from where Wayne Chen left off? Yes.
And I'm opening my microphone. Thank you, Clyde, and of course, all as well. Good afternoon to your panel. Hi, Joe. Hi, Wayne. I kind of missed a part of what Wayne was saying, and so I came in when he was talking about the need to document and the way that which I also have spoken about and have a challenge with. We foreground this notion of having an oral culture and the orality, and my responses to that has always been, and when those who are the bearers of oral culture have died, where will we get the history? So we do need to continue to document the stories of who we are, especially as it comes out in the music culture, because Bob Marley remains the most written about phenomena in Jamaica's music culture, bar none. And he's still being written about, and he's being written about by people who are neither Jamaican nor Black. 98% or so of the books that have been written about Bob Marley are written by non-Jamaicans and mainly by people who are non-Black, and he's still being written about. And so there's a challenge we have had in this society where we have a love-hate relationship with our music culture, particularly when it's in its heyday, and so the documentaries of it, whether film or video or otherwise, tend to be limited. I find that people shy away from documenting the music culture because they're afraid of being chastised, because again there's this very anti-intellectual response to writing, putting out information, but also to writing about the music, not just the people in the music, but the general phenomena from different perspectives. And so when I started my own journey writing about Jamaican music in the Department of Government doing my MPhil, there was very limited information. There was hardly anything to draw from. and I had to spend hours and hours, hundreds of hours at the Gleaner. At that time, we were allowed to go in, and I was almost kind of sued the Gleaner member staff to find good information from the Star and the Gleaner, and also from the National Archives and elsewhere, to put together my first piece of work that was on my Master's of Philosophy in the Department of Government that becomes a book called In the Dance Hall, because at that time there was very little written about it in any kind of academic setting or popular setting, except from the journalists who had done a great deal of work on the ground, and of course people who were also archiving popular culture, Anthony Miller, ER, and others, who had provided a lot of video footage that I could draw on. These are the things that many of us have had to draw on, and so I recognize that there has to be a lot of work done. I mean, even approaching some of the publishers to publish certain works, you find that they are hesitant because, again, one has to be politically correct in what you put out. And so there's also that challenge. And writing, whether scripts for movies or otherwise, is a time-consuming effort, because you have to think, you have to read, and you write. It's a very time-consuming effort, and it takes a great deal of resources. So many times, individuals do have an interest in writing and publishing, but they have to be about the business of earning a living. I've found that that has been a challenge for our society, because the funding sources for writing and the other resources that people need, people have to make a choice between what am I going to be able to do and how am I going to be able to fulfill this desire I have. So many books are there to be written. I met many men and women in the industry, as well as who are working around the industry, who want to publish books. Copeland is a great example, and I have to big up Joe and Clyde and the entire team for really bringing that book to life. I have my copy here somewhere, I think, because I was very grateful to get my copy from Copeland, because of the way that we had waited on this work for so long, and the importance that it has in documenting an important part of our culture, for people who need to get that kind of information. So I was very grateful to have the book, because I know the kind of work that goes into publishing a book and pulling together that impressive kind of artifact that a book, really is. And yes, I am a fan of the other kinds of publications, but I find that the way that a book travels and translates across different genres and resounds across time for different people, whether they are children, they are adults, they are people doing research, whether they are academics, they are people who research for films, people want to find out about the culture. Books provide a very important way of cementing that. And so I spent a lot of my time writing articles, not just for the newspaper, but for journals, academic type articles, not so academic writing books. I have 5 academic books. I have 1 popular book, and I have another book coming out. It's going to be ready for June or July this year, about dancehall culture, because I have an interest in continuing to document. That's a very under-documented area of work in our popular culture that demands a lot of work, even as we are trying to look as well at the cadre of men and women who have come before in our other genres, who have been significantly under-documented in all the various formats. So we have a lot of work to do. We need some resources, and so we have to put some of that together. And I'm grateful for the conversation.
I want to touch on something, because you spoke of the information that you glean from the newspapers, but there is a considerable gap in terms of the kind of data, the kind of material that you might need for a comprehensive analysis, and what sometimes is there in the newspapers. And I mean, although we must admit that newspapers and magazines are usually the first draft of history, you need the contribution of people like a Copeland, who is a participant observer, and he sometimes is able to give glimpses of the realities of the business that most journalists are not going to be able to provide, or researchers normally.
Well, of course, Clyde, all my work is supplemented significantly by a great deal of participant observation. So I'm not an armchair academic sitting at the ivory tower. I am involved with the culture in a very intimate way, with the people in the culture, the men and women in the culture. I traveled all over the world to events, all over Jamaica. There are events that happen every year in Jamaica that do not miss me. I'll jump in my vehicle at 12 midnight and go off to some of the events that are happening. I'll turn up at various events and also maintain a long and strong and ongoing relationship with many of the creators of the culture and the bearers of the culture, because interviews, which are very time consuming, have to be a part of the foundation of the work. You actually have to speak to the people, which is again why we talk about the need to have the resources of time to be able to meet and speak with the people who are the bearers of the culture, so that you're able to tell the stories that are important in the way that they need to be told. So I'm not saying that I went to the Glen and just wrote a book based on
I'm not saying
that these become important, Clyde. You have to have some because I wasn't there in 90 long, even though I've been going to stage shows for a really long time. I've been going to stage shows for 3.5 decades, like physically attending a lot of stage shows across Jamaica, all of them for a very, very long time. And so the kind of historical reflection that I'm doing, not as someone who goes and sits backstage and fraternizes, but as someone who insists at all times that regardless of backstage opportunities, I must be in the front of the crowd where the real people are, to feel the responses and the surge of energy and the crowd response and hear the comments. That's why you see me walking around events and wandering around like a lost soul at many events, because I have to hear from the vendors and all the people, because then you get a composite feel of the responses to the persons, the events, the individuals, which is the top artists, who do they like, why, and you'll see little things happening. So again, it's a time consuming aspect of it that is a part of why I think we don't have as much coming out. And many people don't want to tell all of their stories just to any and everyone. It's a little difficult sometimes to get access to individuals, to get all the story. You have to build a trusting relationship sometimes with people to get enough of the story coming out.
Joseph Bogdanovich, now I call you a serial entrepreneur in the entertainment business. You have invested in almost every area of the entertainment business in Jamaica, and now you are into book publishing with regards to Down Sound books. Now, is this part of a grand strategy, grand design in terms of being able to have a finger or a hand in the different aspects of entertainment in Jamaica? Because you are, I don't think it's a secret, planning to set up a museum, and therefore I suppose documentation of the kind that you're doing with Copeland is critical. Tell me about your involvement with this venture and how it fits in the grand scheme of things as far as your strategy and philosophy is concerned. Joseph? We seem to have lost Joseph there for a second, so let us go back to Wayne. Wayne, Professor Hope was talking about the question of people's feelings and, the sensitivity, and that being sometimes a deterrent in terms of cataloging the experiences that you might have on the road and in the business. You have not necessarily been on the road in a serious way, but would you like to comment on that?
It is not unique to the music business. It is a part of the reason why Jamaica doesn't have a comprehensive history text that deals with our post-independence history. That is why we're still using Clinton Black in the schools. We have a fraught history, and Jamaica has not had peace, truth, and reconciliation. Let me put it in the broadest term. And there's no reason why it hasn't. I mean, it covers the entire music culture, the entire music industry, because Jamaica is tribalized, there's no doubt about it, and not just along partisan lines, along class lines, along urban, rural. People have been ripped off in business. Some of the people who claim themselves as victims have themselves ripped off others. There's a lot of skeletons in our closet that we have not reconciled. And it's no different from any other country. if you look at the history of popular music in the US, look at the early days of whether it's Colonel Tom Parker and Elvis Presley, it's only recently, in recent times, that the ostensible king of rock and roll is finally having to make way for the people who really created the music that he copied and put forward. Victor's right history, and it's still contested space. But you made a very profound, as always, Clyde, reminder that journalism, that the articles that are written, that what we record now are the first draft of history. History, we're still too close to much of what is happening to understand the context. We can sit down and document every single record, just to give an example, that King Tubby may have done in his studio in Waterhouse. But do we fully understand the impact of Tubby's innovations in his studio, using very limited equipment in a very impoverished corner of a small town, a relatively small city, in a relatively small country? What has been the impact, firstly, on global popular music, and secondly, by extension, on global culture? Do we understand how the little remixes that producers were doing here for necessity, economic necessity, how did it ultimately impact global popular music? How did what Jamie was doing in his studio, what Bobby Digital was doing, what Steely and Cleaver were doing, how ultimately it flowed into what is now one of the biggest genres on the planet, and I speak, of course, of reggaeton. Let me ask you something. We have two drafts. We record events, we record everything. The discography, what is put out, we weren't that good at it, but it's getting better. There's a wonderful site on the internet now that's a huge resource for me, Discogs, which has sought to document every single record ever released. Back in the early 70s, when I first started to really pay attention, the studios in Jamaica were putting out maybe 60 new releases a week, sometimes up to 100 releases a week. 99% you will never hear again, because by the time the agent came out into our little stores in the rural areas, they picked up what didn't sell and they were melted back down to make new records. Thankfully, there was an upsurge in the 70s of interest outside of Jamaica, 70s and 80s. So Japanese collectors came and bought up, European collectors came and bought up. So thankfully, outsiders were doing a great job of documenting just what we had put out. I think we're now 60-odd years removed from the formation of our music, and coming to the second stage now. What does it all mean? Who has done all the work? And we have to work to document. Our good friend Maxine introduced me to a young Irish lad. Well,
yeah, that's Maxine Stowe.
Done the work of putting down archiving every single thing that had ever been done at Studio One. I think when we last checked, it was at 16,000 recordings coming out of Studio One. This kind of work is essential. This is the kind of work that the National Library of Jamaica ought to be doing, or ought to even do a desk review and put it all together. So when we do sit down together to understand what it all means, or groups of us in different areas sit down to decide what it all means, at least we can have historically accurate data on which to rest our conclusions. And we can't separate it from what is. Jamaica is not a closed system. I touched earlier, just because Barrington Levy jumped to mind, on the influence of spaghetti westerns on Jamaican music, on the influences of the good, the bad, and the ugly for a few dollars more, the soundtracks that no doubt our young people went into the cinema on a Saturday matinee and heard. And you can hear it in some of how dub developed. That dub was influenced by
just a second, Wayne, because you make some very important points here. Going to take a break. We'll be right back. Musically speaking, we're coming live from the National Arena, Expo 23. Musically speaking, this afternoon, we discuss the documentation of our heritage. Online, we have Joseph Bogdanovich, serial entrepreneur. We have Wayne Chen, author, lawyer, banker, and so much more. Professor Donna Hope, professor of culture, gender, and society. And now we're joined by Copeland Forbes, author of the book Reggae My Life Is, as told to one Clyde Mckenzie. So, Joe, you're there now. You keep dropping off. I don't know why. I had asked a question about your grand plan, because you seem to be one of the few people who have been investing heavily in Jamaican entertainment. Do you know, and Jamaican culture, is there a secret that you have that we don't know about, or is it that you have more money than we do?
Well, I doubt if I have more money than you guys do, because you're wealthy in terms of your culture and the future and what you can do. But I can tell you this, for me, I come from a different perspective than the academe that's represented at this particular focus point here. And I'm intrigued with everything that you're saying, although I don't hear it all because I have a bad connection here. But for me, I come from a generation that, from an entertainment generation, family, where, we were in the concert business. We did a lot of rock and roll, and we did a lot of blues and soul music, just a whole lot of things, including reggae music. And I came from a generation that was really into the, stop the war, give peace a chance type of perspective. And so when some of these concerts that, my family was involved in, with maybe over 10 Bob Marley concerts and a few with Peter Tosh, I don't know about the Wailers, maybe the Wailers involved too. But I looked at it as just a kid, from LA, like the youth today everywhere. They like to party and they like to be with their friends. And, Bob Marley would come up on that set list often. And he was the dreadlock person that talked about, equal rights and justice, and talked about a lot of social matters. And we, as a generation, would listen to this and support it because, we were part of the generation that really stopped the color barrier between black and white. And that was a very, very important deal in terms of my generation, where I came from. So for me, I look at this culture as something that is so transcendent, in the sense that it's loved all over the world, multiple languages, and then when you put a little patois in that, you can't really understand a lot of the lyrics, but you still like it and you embrace it because of the magic of the music and the vibe. So the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing here in Jamaica is I love music. I come from a musical background, as you probably know. And I got involved in reggae music for a lot of reasons. And the concert business, got started late here in the concert business in Jamaica, but you've seen what we've done with it in a short period of time. And now this opportunity that came up with publishing a really good, properly written book that has a great source coming from a practitioner himself that did everything in the record business, the reggae and dancehall music, was just an opportunity that I was really thrilled to have that opportunity. And now we have the book out and starting to sell books around the world and here. So I just think it's part of my mission, as one who's a businessman and investor in Jamaica, and doing what I can do. That's it.
Yeah, Professor Hope, you that's a good commentary from Joe as to why he has been involved. But you mentioned that you saw as a deficiency the fact that Jamaicans were not writing the stories and Jamaicans were not doing the publishing and all of that, and you thought that might be a missing link in terms of our being effective in the marketplace. But here is Joe. Well, Joe is now a Jamaican, but here it is. He came from outside, and he has been a significant investor in what we're doing. And I would say that a lot of us here have not been investing as much in that kind of thing. For example, the publishing business. We've not had many Jamaicans being involved in that. And the music business and music book publishing or literary publishing is a big deal. I mean, we have some of the greatest stories, and Copeland story is just one of many, you know, and we have not been involved in that. So what's your take on that?
I think segueing from Joe's comment, and I have a dog who's barking, but segueing
That's
from
all right.
Joe's comment, and Joe actually underscores what we have been talking about, that people who are not Jamaican, people who are not connected to the culture and the society in that intimate way, in the sense that they are born in it and have to live with the kind of, you know, treading across a different, whether, you know, class or color or those kind of conversations, have a very different response to it. So you'll find that many of the individuals that I meet who have been writing about Jamaican culture, Roger Stephens is one. When I met Roger, I was blown away by the amount of work he had been doing and the collection that he had at his house. And the first time I went to Rotterdam, I remember 2009, they were in Italy, and I remember going into this tent, and there were hundreds of books written about marijuana. They had this whole ganja tent, and they had a lot of ganja exhibits. There wasn't a single book there by a Jamaican. And these are the things that resonate with you when you're looking at it. Because, you know, we are a ganja paradise and we are everything. But there was nothing in that room that had a Jamaican's name on it. I was very traumatized by it, actually, because when you listen to the sounds that come out of Jamaica, we spend a lot of time talking. But in terms of the actual doing, so what Joe is saying, and I agree with him, is that he simply does what he needs to do. And some of us have decided we're just going to do what we need to do. So you're going to publish books regardless of what people say about what you're doing or what they think about why you're involved in the culture. And that is the only way that you're going to really make a mark in that kind of industry. You're going to put out documentaries, and there are people who are doing work. But again, because you're locked inside of this particular culture, people have to kind of respond. I find that many people respond to a lot of the conversations and the distractions that are floating around in the social, in the society. So many things have not been dealt with, and
So
more often than not, it is when people migrate, live elsewhere, and are connected to other kinds of networks that they begin to realize maybe there is some value here. I need to write a book. I need to do a film, and you see them return with some resources, and those resources are now being put into that. So there's that kind of, I mean, you can't get one of our banks or so to finance certain things that are cultural. You'll have to be successful first. Because they're going to ask for collateral, they're going to ask for everything, a business plan. And so many people who have great ideas are unable to bring them into any kind of product that you can actually have a tangible connection to.
But there is a two-sided coin in this discussion, because one could say that Joe has seen the Jamaican culture through a particular lens, maybe initially as someone from the outside and saw opportunities that we did not see. But then now that people like Joe have led the way and, you know, have shown that there is value in our culture, we would want to think that there would be more of these people from our own neck of the woods who would get involved, or we're hoping that that will happen. Now, Wayne, you spoke about the issue of historical distance, and that maybe there is more time that needs to pass in terms of our doing our real assessment of what is going on. Do you, for one, think that outsiders chronicling our story, that they do so with a greater level of dispassion than we do? And do you think that's an advantage? Wayne? I'm not hearing from Wayne Chen.
Sorry, I was muted.
Oh, sorry.
The historical record will show that has been the case in terms of what has been documented, as Donna said when she went to that booth in Rotterdam. But I want to give you, I want to correct certain common fallacies. There is a commonly held fallacy that Jamaicans didn't invest in the music, or I think people are waiting for some listed company on the stock exchange to put money in the music, or the banks to put money in. The banks are governed by rules set by the Bank of Jamaica as to what they can do with customers' savings, depositor savings. So that is not going to happen. It never happened in any jurisdiction. It's not going to happen in Jamaica. But I want to go back to the history of the internationalization of Jamaican music. It's probably significant that Harry Belafonte passed this week, and people tend to forget his role in taking Jamaica's music global, and the role that Louise Bennett played, and the role that ordinary Jamaicans, because I don't know how we would categorize it today to be politically correct, but some of the hits that Harry Belafonte had in the 50s that sold millions worldwide and made him famous were songs composed by ordinary Jamaican workers, whether they were stevedores loading a banana boat, whether they were Jamaican peasants going to their work in the field, work songs that suddenly became calypso in quotation marks, but were really meant to Jamaican folk songs that were taken to the world. So we haven't yet properly contextualized that, how Jamaican music went global. The second one, talking about investment. We cannot talk about Jamaican music and not talk about some Jamaican businessmen. I'm not here to make a case for businessmen, but they often tend to get kicked to the curb in terms of their role that they have played.
It's more, I think it's more traditional capital.
I include Joe in that too, because I know Joe has invested a lot into Jamaican culture. And I know he's not going to tell you that it's often frustrating, but it's often frustrating. But the role of Stanley Morton in building the first recording studio in this country, the role of Chris Blackwell in building Island Records, not coincidentally named Island Records, into the largest independent recording company in the world at one stage before he sold to Polygram. The role of the black entrepreneur, because it's not just rich white men that did it. People like Coxsone Dodd.
Duke Reid.
I don't think we properly contextualize Coxsone as an entrepreneur. We know him as a music producer and put that in quotation marks, and we ahem and said maybe he wasn't as much. But he was very much a part of the music, but he was very much a part of the business of music. And the intellectual property that Studio One has built up is tremendous and still to be properly mined and understood.
Yeah, but
intellectual property that Duke Reid put together is yet to be properly understood. Yes, Clyde, you're about to say. And I only say that we know, but we haven't properly contextualized or even properly leveraged these what we know. Let me put it there.
The criticism is that traditional capital
but you see, I don't know why we segment. Capital is capital. Mm-hmm. If Blackwell, who is this kind of a rich, wealthy Jamaican Jewish family, was willing to put his personal resources in, what are the imprimatur? We're waiting for Mr. Henriquez and Mr. Ashenheim to put money in also. It never happened in any jurisdiction. Look at who put the money in the U.S. that built the music made by Delta bluesmen and gospel singers. It was done by local businessmen. It was done by a town park.
People who came up by their boots.
If you want to put it that way. It wasn't done by Citibank or General Motors.
Well, at some point they came in.
Ordinary entrepreneurs.
At some point they came in, because one of the problems that seemed
they came in when the thing got gentrified and corporatized as it would today. And let us not forget, some people I know, let me put it this way, put together a company that was listed in Jamaica, the name slips me now, to fund songwriting, to fund creatives. I don't remember that launch, maybe 10, 12 years ago.
C2W.
There's the one, listed on the stock exchange. A lot of money went down in that, A lot of money went down. A lot of Jamaican capitalists have invested money in the music industry, and many of them never made any money.
Joe, coming back to your role now as a publisher and getting involved in the book distribution and book creation business, tell us a little bit about that, because you didn't elaborate too much on your involvement in that area.
Well, we're taking a very independent approach based on technology. And I think that the publishing and the bookstores are starting to to change significantly. So it's Amazons of the world and a few others are really the biggest sources of distribution internationally. And I think it's a question of when selling books is like selling records in the old days. You know, you have to put those records, or in this case, books, into various stores that dot a few stores here in Jamaica and a few others in Europe. And you get returns when they don't sell. So it's a business that it's becoming more mom and pop oriented. The trouble with the mom and pops is that it's a difficult business to keep tabs on and to keep it promoted in a way that the right people, the diaspora, the people that even get beyond the diaspora, they're really interested in good music. And no one can say that reggae and even dancehall is something that really stands up in a lot of communities, especially with the youth around the world. So basically the way we're looking at it is this is our first book. We're releasing it in a focused way. It took a little while to get it off the ground, but it took a long time to get the book written. So I'm feeling comfortable with where we stand. And I think that the book will do well based because it's a well-written book. It's got a lot of history. It's got a lot of subject matters in terms of what not to do if you're a musician coming up or an entertainer or an artist, things of what not to do and how to do better than your forefathers and continue the journey. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, well, just another question. Is the book itself where you're looking to make a significant amount of your recovery on your investment, or are you looking at other forms of recovering your investment?
Well, what's a great thing about the book is that it has so many incredibly attractive stories on various points of view that it's very possible, you know, to be able to link with various producers in the entertainment business, like the movie business and the TV, especially the TV business in terms of series. There's so many stories in this book that you could go on for a long, long time, and we think that's really where the biggest area for this product to come out and get a return on investment. That's what I think, and I think you think possibly the same, Clyde. And I hope that Mr. Forbes will be comfortable with a bright future on this book.
Well, we've been joined by Copeland, and you know, he's very good at telling the story, should I say? So,
yes.
Copeland is right beside me. So, and the book is right before me. So, Copeland, if there is a overarching narrative, I mean, I think Joe might have alluded to it, but what is that general story, that general message that you think people should take away from Reggae My Life is?
Not one, not two, not three, not four, but there are many, right, that they can take away. You know, in the last 2 days, I just look back at some of the journey and the historic moments, you know, that is in this book. And I can tell you, based on what you just spoke to Joe about, there can be many other areas to recoup from: movies, documentaries, plays, because there's so many things are embodied in this book that the whole music world and people who are not even in the music world can be attached to and learn from and help to eradicate the negative, educate those, and to illuminate areas that were dark in the past. But now, the fact that they have learned not to go down the wrong route, they have learned what some of even the legends mistakes have been made, they can now tread a straight path to success. And I feel happy that I was able to cover so many grounds in this is in the book, so to speak.
So you're saying that there are many lessons to be extracted, but you don't identify one particular theme that runs throughout all of the stories there? You would say?
Yeah. There is not just one. There are many, right? But some of those that stand out is professionalism, right? That our music business has been lacking for quite a number of years. The professional approach, getting professional advice, the legal representative, and most of all, the love for what you're doing, because we don't have no love anymore. Everyone is trying to trample the next one in so many different ways just to be at the top. When if we should unite as a force like what we used to do back 20, 30 years ago, we would be a force to reckon with. You have to understand that here we have a product, a music, a country that everybody wants to talk like you. They want to walk like you. They want to look like you. They want to sing like you. They want to even smoke marijuana just like you. So we must be something special in the world. So there are so many things in the book that people can learn from, not one, nor two, nor three, right, that we have actually covered in it, that can help the young generations coming up and even people outside the music fraternity who are not so much embedded in it, but just business people can learn from, which will attract more corporate companies to be involved in the music industry, because it's not just entertainment. It's 80% business and 20% entertainment.
If you should cite a major mistake that has held back Jamaican music during the time you have been involved with the business, what would that be?
Well, not one again. There are quite a few, but some that stands out in my mind and in my memory and in my daily life, and I feel very down because I knew that I put in more than 100% to make it very successful. The main one was the breakup of Black Uhuru. There is a group that started, and I joined them in 1981, working with the likes of Sly and Robbie, who had just left Peter Tosh's band at the peak of Peter's career, to enhance this group and to push them forward. And I became a part of that entity and worked with them. I've seen all the obstacles, I've seen all the green path, I've seen all the opportunities that they have had, more than any reggae group out of Jamaica I've ever had, including Bob Marley. Never had the opportunities that they had, right? And to see they just throw it away because of egos and bad advice, no non-professionalism, and most of all didn't care about the other person. So that's where it comes, where we have no love for one another, because if we had loved one another, what happened would never have happened. And even to the point where after the breakup, they went on and won the first reggae Grammy, and that wasn't enough to give them the idea of saying, listen, we just almost lost a gold opportunity, let's grab it back and run. That put them further away. So, you know, that was one of the things that stands out in my mind until this very day.
Thank you, Copeland. We're going to take a break. When we come back, musically speaking, we're coming to you live from the Expo 2023 at the National Arena. Musically speaking, we're coming to you live from the National Arena, Expo 23. And Danelia is here. Kevin is in studio, and we have a whole team here. Sean and JB and Cavell, they're all here. And Copeland Forbes is sitting here right beside me. Online we have Joseph Bogdanovich, we have Wayne Chen, and I think Dr. Hope might have left us. We have no more hope. But I tell you, I think maybe I should, read a little excerpt from Reggae My Life Is with a foreword from Rob Kenner. And Rob is the man who has written that bestseller, The Marathon Never Ends, right? just a little thing from this book. It's actually the opening chapter. It's called In the Beginning. And it says, at the time of my birth, my mother, Lillian Hillary Forbes, was living in an area in the outskirts of Kingston called Jonestown, 5 Puyat Street to be exact. It was not very far from the sprawling maternity hospital, Victoria Jubilee, where she worked as a cook and would often retreat to make additions to our family. I often wondered whether the authorities at the hospital had given her an employee or frequent user discount. After all, she enlisted in the services of this maternity facility on 12 separate occasions. I was the fourth of our 12 children and was preceded by my 3 sisters. My father, George Forbes, was largely absent from home. He worked with Billings, a mattress company. I'm not sure if there was any link between his job and his sleeping habits. Bowler, as he was more popularly known, served as a caretaker at the Chatola Park Primary School, where my mother also worked. My parents were married to each other, and my father sad all but one of my mother's 12 children. My father was not a significant factor in my own upbringing. He lived with a woman simply known as Miss Brown. She bore him no children. His seasonal visits to our home would usually result in my mother making another trip to the hospital as a maternity patient. Well, that's quite an opening there, Copeland. You know, and the good thing about this is that you have the capacity to laugh at your own self. And that sets the tone that nobody should be offended if you're a little critical of them, because you first humor yourself. Wayne, you know, there is a challenge in that I don't think we have developed a culture of criticism, literary and otherwise. And I think it's important for us to just examine that, because I think that has implications for the telling of stories like Copeland's. Wouldn't you agree? I think you're muted, Wayne.
Oh, hold on. No, I'm here.
I'm now hearing you. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. No, we have not. You know, I was just reflecting on the American botanist Alex Hawks, who lived in Jamaica for many years. Alex Hawks, for many years in the Gleaner, wrote a weekly column on different restaurants he had visited, and he had this skill of making the most innocuous village cook shop sound like the Ritz or the or one of the top restaurants in Manhattan. Over the years, we have had interesting writers on Jamaican music. We have had good documenters, but I think you're reaching for something a bit more criticism. I will say this. Marlon James, the celebrated Jamaican writer, first came to my notice as a music critic. He was a young music critic in The Observer. And I used to collect his articles because they were so brilliantly thought out and written. And I just happened to meet him one day, and I was struck at how young he was. This was back in the early 90s. So it's not a great surprise. It wasn't a great surprise to me then that he developed into a globally recognized writer. Less frequently, you had writers like Garth White, Michael Record from time to time, writing in our local newspapers. But the truth is that music criticism in Jamaica, on Jamaican music, has not been, it has been more about recording a hit parade, and even that has some, is a mixed bag. It has been about noting the release of popular records or speaking about the popularity of hits. But in terms of a criticism, it's not really a strong part of the Jamaican writing tradition. In fact, interestingly, some of the most interesting criticism, and what brought me to the criticism of Jamaican music, was actually in a British publication from the early 70s, Black Music, where you had people like Lloyd Bradley writing about Jamaican music. Similarly, when reggae went international, certainly after they come and more prominently with Bob Marley, a lot of the American, what I call school of new journalists, critics like Lester Bangs, certainly. Lester Bangs famously wrote when the name just slipped out of my mind now. The album that came out in 77, the Bob Marley album that came out in 77, he called it We Art Music. Dave Marsh, also a famous critic coming out of California, wrote about reggae. But it tended to be the non-Jamaicans. You mentioned Rob Kenner a while ago, people like David Katz. Others outside who have been more consistent in giving objective criticism of Jamaican music. Developing a local literary tradition, I am waiting to see it consistently happen, but it just hasn't been happening. I would love to see some critiques, for argument's sake, on our new wave of dancehall artists. I listened to the latest release by Valiant a couple of days ago, listening to what King is putting out these days, Jashi and others. There's a lot of important music that has come out of Jamaica in the last couple of years. My fear is that much of it has become repetitive. Artists are really quoting themselves. I don't see anybody really writing about that.
Wayne, is this just a function of critical deficiencies in terms of our journalists, or is it also a question of the kind of fear that sometimes permeates our society?
It's a combination of both. The smallness of Jamaica doesn't lend itself to us being brutally frank about some of the things that are coming out. For many reasons, let me put it that way. We're either tied to the business and have a financial interest, or we fear for our safety because I don't think it's an open secret that some of the entourages and followers of some of the current artists don't take kindly to criticism, and not the artists themselves. This is in no way disparaging the artists, but for many reasons, a working journalist in Jamaica is not going to go down that road of frank criticism of the local artists and the local scene. And as I say, it's a pity because a lot of good things are coming out of Jamaica right now. When your producer asked me yesterday to recommend a couple of songs, you heard Kabaka Pyramid a while ago. Kabaka Pyramid just won a Grammy. Maybe I'm not reading enough Jamaican papers, but I'm yet to see a Jamaican journalist give a real tough overview, a real frank overview, a real critical overview of him as an artist and his career so far, where he fits into Jamaican musical culture, where he fits into global music. I haven't seen it. I must have missed it.
Wayne, you know, one of the interesting things, you spoke about Marlon James, and you have people like Colin Channa and that new wave of Jamaican writers. And it is interesting how heavily influenced they are by Jamaican music, and much of what they speak about in their output has a lot to do with the Jamaican music culture. You want to talk about that?
People might find it strange, but you know, Ishon Hutchinson is my good friend. I was just talking to him up this morning. He's the head of the English department at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. The first black person to head the English department at an Ivy League college. Young Jamaican, UWI first degree, postgrad degrees in the United States. Aishan is a great fan of Lee Scratch Perry and has presented on Lee Scratch Perry, has interviewed Scratch, has read with Scratch music playing in Europe, has critiqued in a very serious way Scratch's output. But how many Jamaicans know about it? The fact is that the new wave of Jamaican writers, Aishan, Kai, Marlon James, and others, and Jamaicans recognizing diaspora,
and even the plastic arts like a Ebony Patterson.
Absolutely. Well, I've known Ebony from she was at Enna Manley. They cannot help but be influenced by the music and the culture that they grew up in. And in that instance, it is going to be reggae, dancehall, dub, Jamaican music. Jamaican music in its purest sense is the best reflection or the most accurate reflection of us as a people and our culture.
I mean, going back to the provenance of the issue of who controls the distribution. From the days of Walcott and Vivian Paul and Lamming, the business of the distribution was controlled from the outside. And do we really have much by way of an alternative to that situation? I mean, it is clear that the most lucrative segment of the value chain is controlled from outside. Now, maybe with somebody like Joe now throwing his hat into the ring, there might be a difference in terms of what returns to Jamaica. How do you see that?
You know, once upon a time, I remember, I can confess on the air now that there was a time I was involved in the business, starting in the late 80s into the early 90s. For about 5 years, I worked very closely with Toots Hibbert. Poured a lot of money in. I did some show promotion. I laugh, as I mentioned, top of my idea that to this day, Ninja Man still owes me a pile of money, but that's another story.
Boy, I don't know how you're going to get that now.
I'll tell you that story one day.
You're going to have a hard time. You're going to have a hard time finding that one.
Absolutely. And so whenever the question is asked as to why I don't consider myself, at least certainly 30 years ago, wouldn't have considered myself a part of corporate Jamaica. But when the question is asked me quite often, why business people don't put their money into the music industry, I can tell them all the horror stories based on personal experience going back more than 30 years. But as I said, that's for another time. But I'm sorry, Clyde, I had a senior moment there. What was your question again before I?
No, but I would go down the road now, Wayne, as we are on this point, because I go back to the issue. There's a criticism. You are a banker of renown.
I'm not a banker. I'm a shopkeeper, but
you are very high up in one of our leading banks here. I'm saying there is a criticism of our financial institutions that they have not been too ready to support the cultural industries. Maybe they don't relate very well with the stochastic and random nature of our business, and therefore they don't, or some people say it's because the cultural products come from the margins of the society with which the corporate structure does not relate. What are your views on that?
The rules that govern our financial institutions. The retail banks are governed by the Bank of Jamaica. Well, it's unified regulation now. But the regulatory rules would not permit particular types of investment. In other words, the rules that govern banks recognize specific types of collateral before they could lend money. Of course, there's venture capital, but Jamaica's venture capital
ecosystem is not well developed.
Is not yet well developed. So what you have found over the many years in terms of investment in the music, and there has been investment in the music, despite all that we say, it's not by coincidence that two of the biggest independent recording companies that the world has ever seen were birthed in Jamaica. I mentioned Island Records earlier, which when Chris Blackwell sold to Polygram 30-something years ago, was the biggest price ever yet paid for an independent recording company.
And there's VP.
It was built initially on imported records out of Jamaica, and later on by Billy Small, Jimmy Cliff, and others. And then, of course, we must say Bob Marley.
Natalie Bob Marley.
But it went on to higher heights, of course, with U2, Cat Stevens, and so on and so forth. But Chris Blackwell built a business out of Jamaica. The second one I will note is Randy's, which evolved into VP Records, the world's largest distributor of Jamaican music, and now the world's largest distributor of soca. These are Jamaican enterprises. The fact that to go global, you had to move overseas. You couldn't stay in Jamaica and go global. they moved to New York, and for many reasons, it's easier to distribute and get access to everything there. But we cannot discount the achievements of Jamaican entrepreneurs in taking the music global. And I hope to see one day Joe Bogdanovich, who has adopted Jamaica, if he's a Jamaican as Jamaican can be, that he will leverage his enterprises doing similar things. But I bring us around to today. I remember 30 years ago when I was dealing with Toots, and I'd be sitting down up in rural Jamaica in my office in Christiana, and an A&R man would come from a French recording company, sit across the road and try to convince me to sign Toots. Those were the days. That was a different time. Fast forward now to this century, this decade. The Jamaican artists are depending on the A&R person from Columbia Records to spot them and hope they sign them to a deal. And the whole industry has changed. Thomas Friedman, who famously wrote "The World is Flat." The recording industry has benefited in a way, certainly to the advantage of Jamaican artists, in flattening the distribution channels. You can reach the world right now with a TikTok video or on YouTube. The world is going to be relentlessly good at spotting good products and relentlessly good at discarding bad products. So it's entirely in our hands now to create good product that the world wants. I think it was a shock to some of my contemporaries when Skeng first landed in London, just to give an example. And there was a huge audience waiting for him. Ditto Skilly Bang, ditto Massacre. There are Jamaicans who have reached a global audience without the intervention of a recording company. I see it happening with Valiant right as we speak. The fact is now that we have run out of excuses. Let me put it that way. We have run out of excuses. We have a responsibility here to make products that the world wants. We are no longer held hostage by gatekeepers, not to the same extent that we were 20, 30, 40 years ago.
No, Joe, no, I don't think Joe hasn't made any excuses because he has put his money where his mouth
Joe
is.
is doing the thing. Joe is doing it, putting his money where his mouth is.
Yeah, but I want to ask him though, are there challenges working in Jamaica, working with people like a Clyde Mckenzie and Copeland and these other Jamaicans? I mean, tell us frankly, is there a challenge working with people like these, Joe?
I personally, I like the challenges with working with Jamaicans.
You do?
And,
you get a kick out of it? It gives you an adrenaline rush?
Sometimes, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
It's very noisy.
Yes.
I'm outside. There's a lot of challenges with over expectations at times, or their view of reality is, pretty expansive. And I support big dreams and big expectations and work hard for them to materialize them. But the way I navigate myself through the Jamaican diaspora is with the understanding that you have characters that are very, very, very smart and hardworking when they want to be. They're definitely they wear long shirts, with sleeves. That a lot of things in those sleeves, and you just have to understand who you're talking to, and be able to communicate as clearly as you can, and keep the show on the road. Yeah.
Keeping the show on the road. And you have been keeping the show on the road in terms of your Reggae Sumfest, which unfolds in July of this year. And I take it there will be synergies, promotional that is, between this festival and your book publishing business. Is that correct?
Not only the book publishing business, but in the artist business, even the hotel business. There's we're strictly Jamaican with what we do, and I believe in the concept of unity through music, which there's not much unity here in Jamaica, as has been discussed here today. But I think just the fact that Lady Sauce turned into Marion Hall and looks to have a real big record, which is called I'm Feeling Better. And the video is very popular. And I think the fact that her journey is so dynamic and shows that everything is possible, I think will be a great testament to the will of the Jamaican people, and you're going to see it at Reggae Sumfest in July. I believe that.
Wayne, we have always...
You like that, Wayne? I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. No, well, I just wanted to hear about your festival and how you were planning to tie that in with the selling of your books. All right, so thank you for
We're going to be
that.
selling books there. We're going to be selling books there. Definitely be room to buy them there, and I'm sure that you and I in Copeland will take our turns there behind the desk.
Well, that would be interesting. Wayne, you know, we speak about the Caribbean literary imagination in exile, and you know, you talk about your friend Aishan Hutchinson and you know, there's Marlon, and before that you had Vivian I. Paul, and you had George Lamming, and you had Derek Walcott, and in the main these people were writing about us from the outside. There is not much difference because Marlon and Aishan and Colin Chan and these people, they're still writing from the outside. How do you see this?
If Marlon would put 7 killings forward as an argument to refute your argument, of course he's written many books. But if you wanted a book, if there's such a thing as a great Jamaican novel, A Brief History of 7 Killings is it for you, in terms of the language, in terms of the sensibility, in terms of the topics covered. And while it's a roman à clef, because nobody is really named, there's no doubt that the singer in it that he refers to is Bob Marley. So
yeah, but Wayne, I mean, yes. So all right, so strictly speaking, the inspiration, as we said, is Jamaican, is musical, and all of that. But the publishing and the distribution is still outside. Do you see us?
And that's where the market is. You know, let me tell you, it came as a shock to me because you know I co-authored a book, and the reason I co-authored a book on the music was because such a book never existed. I wrote it because I wrote what I wanted to read.
Yes.
But what came to me as a shock 30 years ago when it started, because it took us about 8 years to complete that book, and I can tell you there was no financial return when you put the time and the effort and the money to put it together. Even though it has sold thousands of copies, there's no financial return. I don't want to throw cold water on the prospects for Copeland's biography. It's an important book, and I want us to continue writing books. But the economics of books is difficult in Jamaica. If we look at Jamaica alone, a bestseller in Jamaica back in the early 90s sold 400 or 500 copies. If you sold 500 copies, you'd be over the moon and say, well, that's fantastic. But 500 copies of a book is not going to put food on your table. So I want to give a shout out here to Ian Randall and what Ian Randall Publishing has done over the many years, because he has made a publishing business in a region that just does not sell a lot of books.
No, you have to give it. You have to give it to Ian. You have to give it.
I have to give him props. So when we published for Ian Randall for the region, but outside of the region, it was Temple University Press. So you're aligned with a big American university. So you immediately tap into the academic market. I used to get messages from interesting university professors who had put it on a reading list in obscure colleges all over the world. So there's a way of tapping in. It's an important story. But despite all the global channels and all that, I would never tell anybody it's a lucrative venture. It's a labor of love, yeah. I'm sure if we had put more effort into it, it might have eventually turned into something profitable. But it's off-putting for potential writers to know that you're either going to have to find another source of funding, whether leveraging the book into something else. But the fact is that books as books alone are, and it's not just about Jamaica and books on Jamaican music.
And please, one second, please, Wayne. We're going to take a break and we'll come right back. Musically speaking, coming from the expo, Daniela is here, Kevin is there, JB is here, Sean was here. and of course Jeffrey, always around. Copeland Forbes is sitting to my left here, and online we have Joseph Bogdanovich and we have Wayne Chen, and we've been talking about documenting our heritage. The fact is that you really can't take claim of your history and your identity if you don't tell your own story. If others tell your story, they're going to be defining you. And that's really the challenge that we face as Jamaicans. We are not telling our stories in the way that we are supposed to be doing. And Copeland is here. He has told his stories, and it is chronicled in the book Reggae My Life Is, as told to one Clyde Mckenzie, and it's published by Down Sound Book Publishing, headed by Joseph Bogdanovich. And Copeland, I know Wayne has spoken about difficulties. Donna spoke about the difficulties. There are linguistic challenges sometimes in our books and our material crossing over. There are financial challenges. There are reference points that we have sometimes that people cannot relate to. I remember Justine Hensel doing an interview recently, and she was talking about the difficulty her father had in deciding whether to do the harder they come in the vernacular or not to do it in the Jamaican language. And it was authenticity that trumped the whole question of trying to reach an international audience. And eventually it did reach an international audience. Now, Copeland, your story is not a Jamaican story in the sense that it is written by a Jamaican, it is published by a Jamaican company, but a lot of what happens in that book transpired overseas, and quite a few of the characters are overseas characters. Tell us a few of them that appear.
Well, one that stands out most in my mind is when I took Jimmy Cliff to South Africa in 1980 on a tour, which during that time the apartheid regime was solid as a rock. And I could have ended up in prison with Nelson Mandela if it wasn't the protection of the Most High, when we were in Cape Town.
Okay. So that was one of those hairy moments where it could have gone either way, and you could have gone to prison, and that, I suppose, is what you would call perils of the road. Exactly. It's a dangerous place to be, and that's a sound advice to give to young artists, young managers, that the road is a perilous place and you have to be very careful. But I want you to tell me about some of the people who feature in this book. I mean, there are a number of individuals like Don King and Mick Jagger and people from Richard Branson. I want you to tell us a little bit about some of these people, which has given the book an international appeal without taking away from its Jamaican character. Tell us about some of those people. Mike Zuckerberg, I think, is in there, and a few others. Tell us about that.
Well, it's such a pleasure that I represent a country and a music that attracts so many intellectual folks around the world. I remember meeting Richard Branson in 1976 when I took the Mighty Diamonds and the Revolutionaries on a tour of the UK sponsored by Virgin Record, and he made some remarks to me that I've seen manifested in this time. One of the things that he said to me, I'm going to buy an island. And I said, how can you buy a country? This little 22-year-old boy telling me this, he ended up buying some of the islands in the Virgin Island. He said he was going to create some history. And the first history he did was to go around the world in a hot air balloon, right? Then meeting people like Mark Zuckerberg was one of the greatest opportunity for me, because it happened while we were on tour with Gregory Isaacs. And this little boy, came around giving us bags and books to go on stage and promote. And we keep doing it. And he was traveling with us on the West Coast at all the shows we were doing. And then he gave me his card and he said, see what you can do to promote this this book, this website and everything. And then later on, I was reading something on Facebook where they said the CEO of Mark Zuckerberg is refused 15 billion, right, for to sell his website. I said, isn't it the same man who was moving with us on the West Coast and gave him his card and his book to help promote? I realized it was the same person,
So, Joe, listening to what Wayne has to say about the, should I say, the vicissitudes, for want of a better word, the unpredictability, the lack of returns for the literary business, are you encouraged to move along after this particular project? Is this going to be your last foray? I mean, your last venture into the literary business, or are you planning to continue? Joe?
Clyde, I keep telling you, everything is possible, and it is if you put your mind to it, or if you feel like it, if you make the opportunities to happen. One of the things I do is I have a long-range plan, and my long-range plan is to be able to put into reality various business ventures that normally wouldn't happen. And that's because I know how to leverage my resources in a way that continues to make money and to more of my time lately than before. I have those kinds of opportunities that I put in place myself. And it took a lot of thought to do that, and it's not always easy to stick by certain guidelines. But I think, you live your life and you do with what you have the best way you can and try to bring more unity in your life. And I like very much living in Jamaica.
So you're not spooked by
Right.
Wayne's gloomy assessment, right?
A labor of love.
Oh, it's a
I'll be writing more.
When I first met Evan
Wayne.
he told me that he was
Yes, Joe.
in the entertainment business, and he recommended not to get involved in show business in Jamaica.
Who did?
And some people go, they take the plunge anyway, and I'm one of them.
Who recommended that you don't get involved in show business?
Evan Williams, our
Oh,
friend.
Evan. Oh, your friend Evan. Okay, I understand. Well, he wants you to get into the building business and the hotels.
Wayne, and they're talking from experience, and they're talking from reality, but there's some of us that keeps on trucking, so to speak.
And we're thankful for that, Joe.
Wayne,
We're thankful that we still have dreamers in the country who can, that the money is important, but it's not the most important thing.
Is
The
there
most
an-
important thing is getting the thing done and the legacy.
is there another book in your works there, Wayne?
Sooner or later, I'm going to write a history.
You're going to write a history. Okay. We'd love
It
to know.
might be a history of jerk, we talk about music, but jerk has become a global phenomenon for Jamaica. And many Jamaicans really don't know the history of jerk in this country. I grew up in Portland, and it was, let me tell you something. If I said jerk chicken 50 years ago, they would say it's heresy. Jerk is only one meat. But look at where jerk is today. So I asked the question, when did jerk chicken become accepted? When did jerk, lobster, and everything else that you see have jerk attached to it become acceptable? Because when I was a kid, if you told somebody about using a pepper apart from bird peppers and country peppers to season jerk, they would say, no, that is heresy. So, it's interesting to see how these things evolve and nobody's recording.
So Joe is going to continue in the book business. Wayne, you might write a history. And Copeland, the fact is that you have so many more stories. Are we expecting Reggae My Life is part 2 or 3?
Yeah, no, well, I'm going to tell you honestly, when I look back and assessed what we actually left out, the great stories that we left out, we're going to have a part 2 and a part 3 and maybe a part 4 and documentaries and spill over, as Joe was talking about, from one entity to the other. Because when I think back after that experience with Mick Jagger in the studio in New York, and you tell it to people, people just wouldn't understand and realize that was a great experience to experience, you know. And meeting and working with people like Chris Blackwell over the years with all the reggae groups was another magnificent experience again. And then traveling with His Majesty in 1966 when he came to Jamaica and I was selected to be his official card or opener is another great moment in time for me, right? and another last one, not the last one, but another great one was when I was selected to travel with Princess Margaret when she represented Her Royal Highness Queen Elizabeth at our independence celebration in 1962, and I was traveling with the royal party as their official card opener. And many more like that. So there are many other great moments that some are in the book, and there are more to come in a volume 2, a volume 3, documentaries and everything else that follows that spill off.
Yeah, but when you look at the task in terms of assembling this work, aren't you a little bit discouraged about trying to do another one? Because when you see how hard it is to put together this piece of work, are you still enthusiastic about?
I have more energy now because the walls that had to be jumped over, we already cleared those, and I learned quite a lot from you that I don't have to write a complete thing to get it. I can cut it down, and that is something I must accredit you for. You taught me that, so I can write many more books now instead of having all these transcripts. I have about 4,000 transcripts in my house, you know, so it's easy. And with so many stories to tell, you know, we have to do it, you know, because it's the betterment for our country, for our people, and for the music and the culture. Because if you don't learn to avoid the mistakes that some of the legends made, then you're going to continue be making the same mistakes. So I'm happy that I was in a position, assisted by you, to steer this boat in the right direction, so that the whole world can look to Jamaica to learn from our music culture.
Finally, Copeland, are you concerned that you might have ruffled any feathers in the creation of this book?
Well, I don't want to say ruffle feathers. I tell the truth. The main thing is not things that I heard or I read in a book or somebody tell me. I actually witnessed the things them myself, so I can talk about it. And can I talk about it categorically, step by step. A few little people might feel a little uneasy because they didn't want that side of them to come out. But if we're going to correct the wrong, we can't continue putting the wrong under the rug. We just have to clean it up, clear it up, and just keep moving, you know, because positive vibration is what we're all about, and we want to enhance unity amongst us, you know, so we can progress together as one big entity.
So what you're saying is that there is no malice in the stories that you have presented. There is no intent to hurt or to embarrass anyone. The primary objective is to teach and to have posterity get an understanding of some of the challenges and the opportunities that are available in the music industry. Is that it?
Exactly what you said. You have said it completely what I would have said. It's not to ditch on anyone, any particular person, but if one person know that I've done so many wrong things, he may feel personal because you talk about it. But you have to talk about it, because if you don't talk about it, they're going to go back and make the same mistakes again. None of us are perfect. Everybody in the industry made mistake. The Wailers made mistake in their early stage, right? But
and you have admitted that you have made mistakes, because you laugh at yourself in the book.
Yes, of course. You know, I've made a lot of mistakes. but I learned to avoid the mistakes in the future. So you hear them, you discuss them, you talk about it with your peers, so you can be on the right track, because unity is strength, and you know, it don't make sense to try to do things by yourself. And I listen to even my baby talk, because you must learn something from it. And I'm in an industry that I love to share. I wish I could stand up and talk for 6 hours straight sometimes to teach, eradicate, illuminate, and to educate.
Joe, are you ready for Reggae My Life is part 2 and 3, given all that you have experienced with it?
I'm pretty much ready for everything. I'm in good shape. I'm thinking clearly. I'm motivated. Let's go.
So you're ready to go. Okay, Joe. And Wayne, your parting shot.
I want to thank Joe for what he has done. I want to thank Hopeland for telling his story. There are many more stories to be told, so Joe, I hope that you publish a few more. Jamaica is full of interesting stories. In fact, I like to say that Jamaica is an unfolding movie drama. Nowadays, multi-part Netflix, Amazon Prime, HBO Plus drama. We have so many good stories here. The danger is that as some of us leave the stage, the stories are lost. Capture as many stories as you can, because it's critical. We have too many good stories that we cannot lose.
So maybe Joe should also venture into documenting movie. Yes, yes.
We're calling him out today.
So we've called him out on that one, because he already has the content. Say that again, Joe. You were saying something.
AI, artificial intelligence.
Okay, AI. Okay. All right. So now we've heard it. We discussed the challenges, the opportunities for documenting Jamaican heritage. We've looked at the earning potential and the unrealized opportunities that have come our way. Now, we are hopeful that a project such as this one from Down Sound Book Publishing will make it internationally. It has all the potential to do so, and we're looking forward. It's available on Amazon, I think Barnes & Noble. It's available downstairs at LMH, and they're going to be the distributors island-wide, so that will be found in the airports and the bookshops locally. And so it's widely available, so that's pretty good. So we want to say, well, we are very hopeful that this thing will do well, and we look forward to see what happens. So Dan, is this where I take my cue to go? I want
Can I interject?
Yes, Copeland.
Just quickly, I want to say special thank you to a brother who is going to pick up from where you leave off here and take it to another heights. Yeah, we shared some great moment in Australia, and that the great Jack Scorpio right here as MC for some of my artist shows.
Okay. And I want to remind you that the IRAMA Awards will be next Sunday, the 7th. I think they will be having a little chat with Ephraim Martin later on the station. So we'll be listening for that. So Sunday, that will be that red carpet affair at it's a Jamaica Pegasus. Okay, so we give, and I think Joe is going to be a recipient of some award there too, as I understand. So, and you too?
That's what I have told you.
Oh my! I mean, it's only me get left out. Oh no, but that's we want to thank Martins for being here for 40 years. That's a good thing. So, this is how we say so long. Want to say thank you to Danelia Doyle. Want to say thank you to Sean Ferguson Cavell. Of course, Jody, Jojo the Queen, JB. So many people to thank for the Kevin, yes. Yes, and Sean, right. All the people who made it possible today at the arena. Do come down and experience a fabulous time at the arena, musically speaking. Clyde Mckenzie saying, you take care until next week.